Hey, it's Mr. Driscoll, and I am drinking coffee because coffee is good. You probably had a teacher or a professor tell you, make sure to use primary sources. And you may be thinking, what the heck is a primary source? I don't know the difference. Well, there's two main types of sources. There's a primary source and a secondary source. Primary source just means that it's a document or any object or artifact that was created during the time period that you're studying. Okay, so that's the major difference between that and a secondary. Secondary is someone who wrote something about it after the fact. So there's a few different types. The first type is an original document. That could be a speech, an interview, an autobiography, or even official records from the government, as long as they were created at that time period, or at least in very close proximity to the time period that you're studying. Another example is a creative work. Now that can fall into a few different categories as well. That could be poetry, drama, art, music, novels of the time period. It's actually a whole unit that I teach about the French Revolution where we focus on artwork from one particular artist. And you can learn a lot from that. So that is also a type of primary source, different artworks and poetry and music. Another category is relics and artifacts. So for instance, pottery, clothing, architecture, statues. For instance, we see there the Roman aqueducts. That all counts as a primary source as well that you can use in your research. Now, some examples of a primary source, the U.S. Constitution. In our civics class, we study that all the time. That is a primary source document created in 1787. The Diary of Anne Frank, news coverage from the Vietnam War. Not of the Vietnam War after, but during the Vietnam War itself. Another example. Michelangelo's statue of David. All of these are primary sources from the time period that really should form the basis of most historical research. Now, a secondary source is a textbook, magazine, article, website, anything along those lines that did not happen or occur at the time period. It's after the fact, explaining what happened in a historical time period. Now, an example of that would be a history textbook, other books about a topic that explain the issues. Now, here's a distinction though. There can be primary sources within a secondary source. So for instance, I'm sure your history textbook or a book about a subject has tons of them inside there, but the book itself is a secondary source. Also magazines and journal articles that provide maybe interpretations of a time period, even though those are written by an author at this current time period, if they're talking about the past, in their interpretation of the past, that's considered a secondary source. Now that you know the difference between the two, how do you find them? Okay, that's one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, where do I find primary sources on this topic? Well, there's a few different ways that you can go about it. First is to find a primary source archive. There are a lot of them out there on the internet that actually sort them and curate them for you. Two examples are the National Archives, run by the government, and then also the Life Magazine Photo Archive. They have a ton of incredible sources that are either pictures or videos or things like that. So if you want to get things that aren't just documents, Life Magazine Photo Archive is a good place to go. But the point is, find these archives. They exist out there, and they do a lot of the legwork for you. If you're going to search online, there are a few different keywords that you can add in there to help with your search. So for instance, you can put your topic like the Industrial Revolution or the Second Industrial Revolution, and then add these key terms. So for instance, documents, diaries, interviews, manuscripts, legal documents. By adding that to your search terms, you're narrowing the search field to something that's most likely going to be a primary source from that time. All right, I hope that helps. Good luck with your research. And hooray for coffee.